I think the greatest cross that we bear is our personality. I mean, there's a giftedness in it, but also there is a price to be paid at the same time. Thérèse's scrupulosity that she got from the culture, she got from her mother, what have you, was part of the cross that she bare. But because of how she bore it, it's one of the things that made her a saint.
Yes.
You know, if you can bear your brokenness in the way that God wants you to bear it, that's going to make you holy.
Welcome to CarmelCast. CarmelCast is a production of Institute of Carmelite Studies Publications. For more information, you can go to icspublications.org. And today, this season, we're talking about the end of Thérèse's life and certain themes that have come up. Mm-hmm. And today we have the great benefit of having Father Mark Foley, who is the editor of ICS Publications and also has been in D.C. at our monastery here for some time. His prior great spiritual director, teacher, author, many good things. But we have him here to speak about the trial of faith of St. Thérèse. So welcome, Father Mark.
Thank you.
Maybe just to start out, you hear about Thérèse's darkness and a lot of her suffering at the end of her life. Mm-hmm. What is the trial of faith that people often refer to?
That's a good question. I don't know. And I don't say that glibly. I mean, preparing for this, reading over chapter 10 again, it's hard to really know. When you say dark night, what do you mean by dark night? Mm-hmm. What do you mean by dark night when you say dark night?
Dark night, I would say, is in terms of the categories of St. John of the Cross.
Okay.
Experience of loss, experience of deprivation.
Okay. That's
leading, though, to something.
Okay. Yeah, and people ask, well, how is that different than depression? Mm-hmm. Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that the last 18 months of Thérèse's life was truly a dark night, but I'm very hesitant to say that God initiated it, okay? I would say that if you look at what John of the Cross, how he defines dark night, he says, the dark night is an inflow of God into the soul, which teaches the soul secretly in the perfection of love. Now that's different than what actually triggered those last 18 months. I'm a little bit hesitant to believe that God was the actor that was the initial cause of it, Dark night in the sense that once Thérèse was in it, Thérèse really listened to how God wanted her to deal with it and how to love. And I as we go through, we can give some examples. But as far as the onset of the dark night, I would look. You have to look at it within the context of who she was, mm-hmm. and a unique person. I mean, we did a podcast back here a while ago on Thérèse's scrupulosity, and one of the things that was said that with a scrupulous person, they're in kind of they're looking for a conscious certitude. And when they hold on to a conscious certitude, an unconscious doubt comes up. And I think we have some indications that's what's happened. It's not a proof, but some indications. Let me give you two examples. First of all, in regards to the onset of the last 18 months, she says, my soul was filled with great consolation. The hope of going to heaven soon transported me with joy. At this time, I was enjoying such a living faith and clear faith that the thought of heaven made up all of my happiness, and I was unable to believe there were really impious people who had no faith. I actually believed they were speaking against their own inner conviction. So she was so much convinced of the reality of heaven, she couldn't even imagine there were people who didn't think there were heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Now, within 24 hours, the whole thing turned upside down, and she said that within 2 days, my clear faith turned utter darkness, and the thought of heaven that made up all of my happiness was now the cause of torment. Now, I want to make two things said here. First of all, these doubts in faith were not peculiar to these last 18 months of her life.
Yes.
For example, 5 years prior to her trial of faith, during her 1891 retreat, she writes the following. At that time, I was having great interior trials of all kinds, even to the point of asking myself whether heaven really existed. I think one of the ways I interpret the last 18 months of her life is it was an intensification and prolongation of something that she experienced many times, you know.
Yeah.
Now, also, I said, and this is just interpretation, I have no proof of it, that what triggered her unconscious doubts was a certitude. This was not the first time that this happened in her life. Okay, let me give you an example. She speaks about her vocations. She says, not a single doubt concerning my vocation ever entered my mind. First of all, I find that very difficult to believe, but, what was she protecting herself again? Until then, that's the night before she made her vows. Okay, I never had a doubt. Then what did she experience the night before her vows? She said, the darkness was so great that I could see and understand one thing only. I did not have a vocation. I never had a doubt. I'm positive I don't have a vocation. I mean, that is extreme certitude and extreme doubt. So I think that I would say that the trigger that began her night of faith, you have to look at it within her personality. Also, I think there's something else that we forget, that we know that the day or the morning that her dark night of faith began and she spit up blood, that was the first indication of her tuberculosis. However, within context, for 18 months before, she had a sore throat, kind of a low-grade fever, and, she was physically drained and exhausted. And when you're physically down, all of your defenses are down emotionally and psychologically, which kind of set up the situation for these doubts to come up.
Yes.
That's what I think you have to read things within context.
Yes,
Now,
makes a lot of sense.
But let me just say this. I don't have any definite proof that what I'm saying is true. But kind of the limited facts that she gives us and the limited facts that people give us lead me to say this might be the case.
Yes. Well, it lines up. In my own experience, I remember a mother coming to me whose son suffered a lot from obsessive compulsive disorder, which we know is very linked often to scrupulosity, and it's called the doubting disease. And she says what it does is it attacks something that you value the most.
That's right.
It seeks after the thing that you value the most. And you can see in Therese's life too, not even just since she was in Carmel, but from as a little child, the sense she had of heaven and how she kind of put everything on heaven. Yeah. Seeing how sad this life was, or her mom already being there and her little brothers and sisters, that was something she valued so much. And so you can see how it would, those doubts could then generate.
Okay. I think you're touching on something that's very important, and that's the whole context of her life. Why was heaven so not only important, but desperately important, okay? If you look at her life, the whole of her life was a series of separations. When she was 18 months old, she was separated from Zélie because Zélie couldn't feed her. She was then separated from her wet nurse At 4.5, there was the biggest separation when Zaley died. When Pauline went to Carmel, she was sick. In fact, at that moment, she says, in one instant, I realized what life was all about, and that is a sadness and a separation. Now, if you go through separation anxieties all of your life, separated from loved ones, what do you want? That's the question.
Union.
Union.
Right.
Therefore, heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So my greatest joy, my greatest hope, corresponds to my greatest fear and doubt. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's interesting. One of the things that she begins to touch on, but she stays away from, is not being reunited with her parents. I think she stayed away from that because it was too much to bear. Because in the text she said, in regards to the Night of Faith, these voices of the worst materialists regarding march on, and there will be nothing but kind of the emptiness of death. In other words, if there's nothing after life for me, there's also nothing after life for Papa and Mama and my sisters, and I will never, never, never be united with them. I will always have a separation. That touched, I think, her deepest fears.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's a good jump off too to see what were the contents, what was the content of some of these doubts. I mean, what were the things that maybe triggered her or kind of filled it? Because people will often say, "Oh, she didn't believe in God," or she didn't, this or that. But if we really look at her words, what was it that was at that basis of her doubt and her trial of faith?
Well, I think it came out of the context of her life. I mean, this is something I found out a few days ago, that one of the things we know about moods is moods trigger memories that psychologists call mood congruent memory. For example, if you're really in a dark place, emotionally, psychologically, it's going to trigger a lot of dark memories and dark doubts, And when Thérèse got into her trial of faith, what were triggered? And this is what she writes. Frightful thoughts obsess me. It's the reasoning of the worst materialists which is imposed upon my mind. Science is unceasingly making new advances and will explain everything naturally. We shall have the absolute reason for everything that exists, and that still remains a problem because there remains very many things to be discovered. How often have you heard that in today's society from atheists and agnostics? Hey, we don't know everything yet, but give us enough time. Where did Thérèse get this? From her culture. I mean, these thoughts that were imposed upon her mind, where did they come from if not from her memory?
Yes.
Things that she picked up from her culture, and therefore she was able to keep at bay. And all of a sudden, as she's doubting the existence of heaven, what's coming up is, maybe these people are right. Mm-hmm. That's what I think happened.
Very well, and it could have been things that she had heard. I know her uncle was involved in a lot of disputes between like clerical, anti-clerical factions in Lisieux and in the government, and she was probably totally convinced by the arguments from, you could say, the Catholic side. But in these moments, when you're so vulnerable, then all these arguments come back, and you don't have that same support.
That's right.
That you once had. And so, what does she do with that? With all this experience of doubt and the temptations that she was. What does she do? How does she respond?
Okay, this is where I think on the spiritual level, where dark night, as John of the Cross uses it, as an inflow of love into the soul that teaches us in the perfection of love. Okay. It's how she related to it. First of all, she accepted it. Now let's go back to one of the early events of her life where in the Cathedral of St. Pierre, when she saw this holy card of the blood dripping from Jesus' wound, she says, I want to stay at the foot of the cross and offer this for the salvation of souls. In the dark night, it took on a specific form, okay? She writes, your child, however, O Lord, has understood your divine light, and she begs pardon for her brothers. She is resigned to eat the bread of sorrow as long as you desire it. She does not wish to rise up from this table filled with bitterness at which poor sinners are eating until the day you set. Can she not say, in her name, in the name of her brothers, have pity on us, for we are poor sinners? Let me just stop here for a second. Poor sinners was a phrase that Catholics in 19th century France used as shorthand for agnostics and atheists. That we are poor sinners. I desire to eat this bread of trial at this table until it pleases you to bring me into your bright kingdom. She says, I'm going to sit here as long as you want. I'm not going to ask you to take away this trial. I will be here and I will offer my suffering for people who do not have faith. That's supreme charity. That's being taught by God, supreme charity.
Yes. So you can see that, you said with the dark night, that is something positive happening in her, even though she's experiencing the deprivation
Exactly,
and loss.
exactly. It's what you, and I think we can expand this to so many things. I mean, we go through depressions, we go through anxiety, we go through anger. If you have an irascible temper, you may never get beyond it. But how do you choose to control it for the sake of love?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know, it's, and do you do your best? You know, what comes to my mind right now is, I don't know if you know, Evelyn Waugh.
Sure.
You know, Brideshead Revisited. Mm-hmm. He was a convert to Catholicism, and by anyone's estimation, he was a nasty, nasty man. And somebody asked him after his conversion, says, how can you call yourself a Catholic considering some of the things you say and do? He says, you should have seen me before my conversion.
Yeah, that's right.
So, you know, it's kind of like he's doing his best. He may never get beyond his temperament, but he's growing in holiness because he's choosing acts of love for people. That's the important thing. So I guess my takeaway for the people in the audience is you may never get beyond your struggles. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's important. Mm-hmm. You know, if you think you're going to, or that's your goal, you're setting yourself up for discouragement. But can you choose to try your best in the midst of those very, very strong feelings? Exactly. That's really the thing, you know.
And maybe it gives a window into what God was doing in her too, and just in terms of her mission.
Exactly.
You think she was told right when she entered Carmel that she hadn't committed a mortal sin, and how much that freed her in a way from some of her scrupulous tendencies and fears. But yet, this moment, here it is, someone who hasn't committed a single mortal sin is now totally in solidarity with sinners.
That's right.
It's not that she's above them and kind of, you know, bequeathing them on them her grace. She's with them and lifting them up to God and in solidarity with them.
That's right. And I think that also, I hate to say this, but maybe just because of the experience of her lively faith, but I always felt there was something arrogant in what she said. Like, I think they were actually talking against their own convictions. And I couldn't believe that anyone could not believe in the existence of heaven. And I think that what Thérèse really learned in the dark night, one of the things she learned is one of the basis of her little way, that grace is a pure gift. Even the gift to believe that she took for granted from her childhood, she learned in the dark night, this is a gift, that all is grace, even the grace to believe that I think she took for granted growing up in a very Catholic home, kind of a Catholic bubble of herself and Uncle Isidore and what have you. And she came to the thing of saying, maybe these other folks did not have the advantage that I had.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And she could accept of saying, I'm no different than them. Maybe God did not give the gift of faith to these people who don't believe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's a sense of understanding and compassion that comes across.
Yes.
She was just a remarkable woman. And I think another thing that talked about charity in the dark night, and Celine deals with this in her book on My Sister Saint Thérèse.
It's such a great book, by the way.
It really is.
I think people underestimate just what a source that is.
Yeah, I mean, do you see this? Do you see the cover of this? It looks schmaltzy. It looks like a lot of foo-foo in this book. There's no foo-foo in this book. It's solid stuff.
And
Get
you can
it?
see by his markups.
I know. It really is. And let me read this. At various times during the course of this long spiritual night, I feel certain that Thérèse longed to pour out her heart to me in the hope that this might bring her some interior relief. She really says, I got to really talk about my doubts, okay? Celine continues, however, the fear of communicating to me the contagion of doubt in such grave matters held her back. And I think these aren't just words. I think that, when you begin to verbalize things to other people that you respect, it raises doubts in other people. And I think she really she loved Celine and she wanted to protect her from this, and expressing something actually changes what's going on inside.
Sure.
And, one of the things I put down here was, Thérèse was writing about this in her autobiography, and she said, I don't want to write any longer about it because I fear I might blaspheme. Now, I don't know what she means by blaspheming here, but when I read this, a passage from Eric Maria Remarque's autobiographical novel, All Quiet on the Western Front, came to my mind. Okay, this guy fought in World War I, and Paul Baumer, the protagonist of the book, he comes home from leave from the front, and his father wants to hear what's going on in the front. And this is what Paul Baumer says to himself. I realize that a man cannot talk of such things. It would be too dangerous for me to put these things into words. I'm afraid they might become gigantic and I'd be no longer able to master them. I think experiencing the darkness is one thing, but beginning to verbalize it a lot, it becomes more real.
Yes.
And it could have Now, this is just obviously my interpretation, but that's what I think she might have meant by, I fear I might blaspheme.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. I mean, even just in our experiences, with Thérèse, you see that when she had that doubt about her vocation, she talked to her novice mistress, she talked to the priors who just laughed at her.
That's right.
And that's what helped kind of dissipate it.
That's right.
But there's other moments where by kind of giving into those,
Exactly.
by vocalizing, articulating, you actually could make them much worse too, even for yourself.
Exactly. And I think you bring up a good point. There's sometimes when verbalizing and expressing it can be very healing, and at other times it can be very, very damaging. And you've got to differentiate one from the other. I think we're in kind of a, at times, pop psychology world where it says, just get it out. Mm-hmm. Well, you got to discern whether you should or not at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
You really should. You have to be very, very careful. And also, who you talk to.
Yes.
You can talk to somebody about your doubts and things, and they can actually reinforce them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Or they can help you. It's like John of the Cross says in the Living Flame of Love: be careful who you bare your soul to.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Be very, very careful.
And it seems like she knew that intuitively, that at least her sisters, and Celine in particular, she didn't want to subject to that. And so she had her own way of kind of dealing with that in her own internal process.
Yeah.
And maybe you could just speak about some of that. What was her way then of kind of expressing it, or at least lifting it up to God, or how did she deal with it?
I think, first of all, there was really an ambivalence, and she had to work through it. And let me read this other passage from Celine's book. She said, sometimes...
This is proof how great this book is.
I've read this book a few times. All right. Okay. Okay, she says, sometimes in the midst of a casual conversation, Thérèse would make a slip and ask in plaintive tones, tell me about heaven. Or again, does heaven really exist? In glowing terms, I would then proceed to remind her of the joys of eternal life and of the beatific vision. Usually, there was no response, except at times a disconsolate, oh. I was not slow in realizing that my words of, quote, comfort were only augmenting her sorrow. And more often than not, we had to change the conversation. So I think Thérèse at times, she wanted to talk about it, but she realized that when she did, it made it worse. She deals with this in Story of a Soul. She says, when I want to rest my heart fatigued by the darkness that surrounded it, the memory of the luminous country after which I aspire, my torment redoubles. There's that contrast. The contrast makes it so great. I mean, this reminds me of it's a line from the Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius that made famous by Francisca de Rimini in Canto 5 of Dante's Inferno, where she says, there is no greater pain than to recall a past happiness in a time of grief. You know? So it's kind of like, Celine, tell me about heaven. And she's suffering this darkness. She thought it would be helpful, but she realized, not now.
No.
It makes it worse.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes it worse.
St. John of the Cross speaks about that in terms of people who are in the dark night, where the very person they go to for consolation actually ends up, even if they say great things, but for whatever reason you can't receive it, or that's not where she was that moment.
Yeah.
And so you can't get stuck on that just because something that formerly might have helped you doesn't help you any longer.
Yeah. For years I'm not a very enthusiastic person regarding a lot of spiritual things. And for years, when people get excited, like, oh, isn't this so wonderful? And I used to feel guilty about that. But the thing is, that's what often happens. People can come into your life and they can talk about how much they love Jesus with all their heart. And I'm sitting there and saying, I don't have the slightest idea what they're talking about. But I think the important thing here is holiness is not based upon psychic structure.
Yeah.
Emotion is not very prevalent in my life. I just don't react emotionally. But that doesn't mean it has anything to do with my response to God.
Exactly. Well, I have to say, I've noticed too, I can have a cup of coffee. I don't drink caffeine too often, but if I have a cup of coffee on a trip or something, all of a sudden I'm so enthusiastic, I'm so into things, and I feel so excited about maybe certain things in my path or my future. And it does help me see just how tangential those are, and just how, conditional some of those expressions of enthusiasm are.
Yeah. But also I think the important thing, and I like to mention this to the people out there, if there's a lot of people around you, they'll say, oh, I was reading the spiritual canticle and it touched me so much. And you're sitting there and saying, I don't even understand what's happening here. Don't feel guilty. It's like, you just don't. It's as simple as that.
Exactly. We're all different. And she even says that at the very end, in one of her last conversations, where she says, I don't see anything, like, I'm so innerly poor. I can't think about anything. I can't
Yeah,
do anything.
that's right.
But she says, but I'm in astonishing peace, you know?
That's right.
That's
right.
And I think that says a lot, that like God is working still, even, and you think people will go through dementia. I mean, how many holy people, even
Exactly.
saints, you know, or her
Exactly.
own father that went through where your whole psychic structure breaks down.
That's
I mean,
right.
And so you can't connect your emotions or your affect in any way to maybe your relationship with God or
No. I mean, don't measure your spiritual life with an emotional yardstick. That's kind of the bottom line here.
Yes.
Because we're all different, and I think the greatest cross that we bear is our personality. I mean, it's there's a giftedness in it, but also there is a price to be paid at the same time, you know. And it and Therese's scrupulosity that she got from the culture, she got from her mother, what have you, was part of the cross that she bare. But because of how she bore it, it's one of the things that made her a saint.
Yes.
You know, if you can bear your brokenness in the way that God wants you to bear it, that's going to make you holy.
Yes.
And don't get into this mindset that my goal is to get beyond it. Give it up. I mean, if it happens, it happens. But I seriously doubt it. I'm 76 years old. I'm dealing with the same stuff that I dealt with when I was 10 years old. You know. Yeah.
No, that's very hopeful. I have to say, because you're a good example. You're a holy man. You're a great spiritual director. So it shows how God works. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and through those things.
Yeah.
And I think with Thérèse too, at least what's always struck me about was she's in this trial of faith, and the way that she responds, like you said, not depending on her thoughts, not depending on her feelings or what she can analyze or comprehend.
That's right.
But going right to an act of faith.
Exactly.
Right?
And faith that expresses itself really in love. I mean, for example, one of the things I like here is when I sing of the happiness of heaven and of the eternal possession of God, I feel no joy in this, for I sing simply what I want to believe. I mean, I can see her at the divine office praying and just going over the words and saying, I want to believe this, but I'm finding it very difficult, you know. It's like I've never liked the divine office. I've always experienced as being very tedious and boring, you know, but that's the cross I bear in being faithful to it.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
because it's also going to generalize to other areas of my life. I deal with boring people.
Yes.
And it gives me the patience to deal with boring divine office and boring people and the charity involved in that.
Yes.
You know?
To be able to make those choices.
Exactly. The choice is in the love, not in the desire, but in the choice that you make.
Yes.
You know.
I remember hearing that she was her confessor had told her, okay, if you these doubts come, just touch the creed, write out the creed.
Yeah.
You know, so that way it's like you're not even engaging your thoughts per se, or like you're not trying to drum up emotions of faith.
That's right.
You're just making a little act. She would just put it on her, you know, right under her habit, her scapula, and she would touch it. But she took it one step farther, right? He said just write it out, but she decided to prick her finger and write it out in her blood.
Yeah.
You know, just to show, again, this kind of choice that I would shed my blood for this.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
even
right.
though I don't feel it or see it or understand it in this moment.
Okay. Before we go on, folks out there, don't canonize every action of a canonized saint. You know, don't start pricking your fingers and start writing out things in blood. And Thérèse did that, and it was great for her. But no, I think your point is well made, is doing something sensate. When you're in your senses, you get out of your mind. And she was an incredibly reflective person. That was one of her great gifts. But she overanalyzed, and that was, you know, in her scrupulosity, and that was a curse. So I think the priest gave her some really good advice. Do something sensate to get out of your mind.
Get out of
you
your
know.
mind, exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
No, and it also, I mean, if you think about it too, it shows that she knew, she had a sense of like moral the moral quality of things aren't dependent on your doubts, let's say.
Exactly.
So she had these thoughts against the faith, but that didn't make her guilty for willfully doubting the faith or going against the faith.
That's right.
And so she showed that by touching that creed, that
That's
she
right.
was. I always like St. John Henry Newman had that great quote: 10,000 difficulties don't equal one doubt.
That's right. That's right.
And so you can have so many difficulties, so many temptations, but you're still choosing to believe.
Yeah. And the opposite of faith is not doubt. It's unbelief.
Mm-hmm. What could you say, like, in terms of her mission, her overall mission, how would you see the trial of faith connected then to how we would see Thérèse, after her death and what her mission was?
Well, I think it actually goes back. She got her mission, and I think in the Cathedral of St. Pierre when she was, 9, 10 years old, I can't remember what her age, when she realized, I'll stay at the foot of the cross and offer God's suffering for the salvation of souls. And that, and for the rest of her life, that's what she did. I think her ecclesiology, if you want to use a big word, was basically based upon the mystical body of Christ, that any action in love done within the body helps everyone. Mm-hmm. And she offered that up, especially for priests and missionaries, not just because this came from her alone. This was St. Teresa's vision of Carmel, that prayer and charity is apostolic, and we pray especially for priests. So Thérèse was truly a daughter of St. Teresa, and she offered her suffering up for missionaries, for atheists and agnostics. Her first child, she called, was Pranzini, the murderer. So she realized that what she did, her spiritual life wasn't just a thing of self-development, but it gave her a sense of her life of generativity for others, that my life has significance beyond my own little drama. Mm-hmm. And I think this is so important for people. We get so wrapped up in our little dramas. And, I used to, when I was growing up in grade school and the nuns used to say, offer it up, I just shook my head and I'm saying, basically what they're saying, stop complaining. But there's a lot of wisdom in that offering up your sufferings and prayers is uniting them to Christ for the salvation of souls. That your life in doing that has eternal significance. Mm-hmm. Yes. That I think was Therese's vision,
Yes. And you can see how that would purify some of her maybe ideas of heaven, because when Celine's talking about all the joys and the great things at this point, she's so moving towards love that it's like that, because that's going to be heaven for Thérèse. It's not about all these joys. It's about giving yourself so completely that you can just, continue to love and receive love from God and continue to love and then spread that to others. I mean, so you can really see how that movement towards love, making herself an offering, even the trial of faith being an offering, it's really kind of gearing her towards what heaven is really, as opposed to just ideas, even beautiful ideas about it.
Yeah, I mean, the great phrase she always said was, I'm going to, in heaven, I'm going to do good on earth. Mm-hmm. I mean, this, the old image of the showering of roses.
Yes.
Now, obviously, all the saints intercede for us, but she had a real sense that was her mission, her missionary spirit of wanting to go to the missions. She never was able to, and therefore she became a great missionary in heaven.
Right. And kind of bringing it back to the relics, that the relics, go on these tours of different countries. They haven't been here in 25 years, or they are here currently, and you can find more at the Thérèse Relics 2025 website if you want to see more where they'll be. But it's just interesting how there's probably fewer people out there, fewer saints, that show the reality of heaven more than Thérèse.
Yeah.
I mean, just in her interventions, when the healings that happen and keep happening, and just these crazy things that people experience with Thérèse's presence. And it's interesting that probably how much she suffered from the thought of there not being a heaven, right? And how God just flips that on its head.
That's right.
You know.
That's right. Yeah, it's really a mystery of God's grace that we don't understand. We really don't.
So with the trial of faith, it was leading to something. Was there a relief in the trial of faith? I mean, did she experience the trial to be dissipated eventually?
Two comments on that. First of all, during the trial of faith, Thérèse gives the impression that it was in different degrees, and there are times it did lift. I mean, she uses that image. She says, when the clouds are like covering me, but every once in a while there's a rend in the cloud, and a ray of light comes down to relieve me. Now, how often that happened, to what degree, we don't know. Was there a resolution at the end of her life? We don't know. All we know is the testimony is that when she died, there was a smile on her face. Yeah. Now, what she was smiling at, was there a sense of there was a relief from the trial of faith that she saw God's presence at the time? We don't know. I mean, people believe what they want to believe. My belief is I don't have the slightest idea.
Mm-hmm. One thing I think it's very telling is that they said she was gripping her crucifix so strongly that they couldn't get it out of her hand after she died.
Yeah.
And so I think that says a lot just about how she was continuing to respond to the trial of faith.
That's right. That's right.
And
yeah.
So we don't know her actual experience, but we know
that. No, we don't. We really don't. And as I said, I think at the beginning of this podcast, the more I read about her, how little we know. What comes to my mind right now is that scene when she was like maybe 6 years old, and she went with her father fishing. And kind of lunchtime came, and she took out a sandwich, and it was a piece of bread with raspberry jam on it, or strawberry jam. And she looked at it, and the jam kind of had faded over a couple of hours, and the bread was crumbly, and she looked at it, and what came to her mind was the transitoriness of life. What was she actually thinking at the time? What was going through her mind? I don't have the slightest idea, but that's very, very significant, that she looked at things from an eternal perspective in temporality, and how she put these things together regarding this life and the next life. We don't know. How far does it go back? How did it develop? What went on in her mind? We don't have the slightest idea. That's where she really lived.
Yes. Well, it's a beautiful thing to show how meaningful such a seemingly inconsequential experience like that can really be.
It can be, yeah.
And her life was just, because she was so given to God, it was just so full of that sort of meaning.
That's right.
And so the trial of faith, all of it shows. It's leading to something, at least. It's
That's right. That's right.
So,
That's right.
So, well, thank you, Father Mark, for being with us. I think it's a great episode, and we hope that people can learn too from their own experience, maybe perhaps with doubt or difficulties with the faith.
Yeah, that's right.
That they're not alone.
No, they're not. And Thérèse is one of these people that we should really pray to, because she knew what doubts were. She knew what darkness was. In fact, she says in the last conversations, she said, I wonder why more atheists don't commit suicide. She says, if I didn't have faith, I would commit suicide without a moment's hesitation. I mean, you ever have those days when you just wish it were all over? when you're having one of those days, Thérèse is the go-to person.
Yes.
She really understands.
She understands.
She really does.
And she knew how to just keep hoping and keep trusting in the midst of it.
That's right.